Hi everybody. My name is Alan Villa. I'm one of the co-founders here at Klipfolio. So today I'm going to show you how to connect with Google Drive and bring a sheet in from Google Sheets. So right now you're looking at a sample dashboard inside of PowerMetrics, which is part of Klipfolio. And to start off, we're going to add a new PowerMetric and walk through the process that way. So we're going to click on this button right here. And to start off, we're going to search for Google Drive. So here's Google Drive. The first thing, of course, that we need to do is we need to connect to my account so that we have access to all of our files. So we'll use this account here. We'll allow access for Klipfolio. And that will then create a token that you can then use for future connections into Google Drive, or actually any of the Google applications. So next step here, and that'll then allow me to choose a file and then connect that with Klipfolio. So here's the example sales data that I want to connect with. This is data that is coming straight from Google Sheets. So we'll select that. And it's then going to ingest this so that we can actually have a look at this data and make sure it's exactly what we want. So this looks about right, but it's always a good idea to sort of pause here and make sure that your data is set up properly and is as clean as possible as well. If you spend time doing it here, it'll definitely make building the visualization a lot simpler. So there's a few things that I want to do here first. First, we want to adjust the date here because it's bringing it in as Unix time, and we want to bring it in as something a little bit easier to read. I want to add currency to my revenue data because we're going to build a visualization based on revenue. And then the last thing, just from a cleanliness point of view, we're going to get rid of this column before we save this model here. So I'm going to click on the Edit button, and we're going to do those three things. So let's start with the date. So by clicking on the three buttons here, I get access to my data formats. We'll choose Date. Now I happen to know that it's bringing this date in as seconds as opposed to milliseconds, so I can go into the side nav here and I can just say, well, I know that it's seconds, so we'll correct that. And you'll see that now those dates actually make some sense. Now let's just pause here for 2 seconds while we're looking at the date column. In 2 or 3 steps, we're going to have to choose the shape of this data. And you can see that I've got January 1st for bread and for milk. So what this data is doing is it's summarizing the data on a periodic basis. And there's different types of ways that you can bring your data in. And knowing how your data is shaped is going to be important in 2 or 3 steps. So keep that in the back of your mind as we look at that. So the next thing that we wanted to do, of course, we wanted to summarize or format this as currency. So we'll go ahead and do that. And as a last step, we wanted to get rid of that other column. So let's go over here. And instead of using the 3 dots, everything that you can do in the 3 dots, you can also do in the toolbar up here. So we're going to remove that column, and then this data source is nice and clean, and we're going to save that so that we can move forward to visualizing it. So let's click Next. This is the data source that we want to use. And as I mentioned, even though there's a number of different measures here that we could visualize, I want to track revenue, and I want to track it on a summary basis. Now you could also choose average or count or min or max, but for our purposes here, and you can always change that as well, we're going to choose sum. So let's click Next. And as I mentioned, we want to be able to actually analyze this data. So I want to analyze or segment this data by product, by country, and also by how my sales reps are performing. So we'll select those things as well, and then we'll click Next. In most of the data sources that you bring in, you'll probably have a date column, which is great. Should your data that you bring in not have a date column, Klipfolio can append a date based on the ingested timestamp. So keep that in mind if you don't have a date column inside of your data source. So we're good. We've got our date column, and we'll click Next. Now this is where I mentioned before you want to understand what your data looks like. And for our case, we've got a daily summary, so a periodic summary. As I mentioned, we can have transactional values as well, which is the real raw record level data. Current values, which is almost like a cumulative tracking of your data. And then the periodic summary. So in this case, Klipfolio auto-detected that, and away we go. But again, it makes sense to pause here and make sure that this is the right shape that your data is in. So let's click Next. Let's rename this visualization. I'm going to call it Product Sales. And currency is right, and we want to have this trending up. So the favorable trend is trending up. So let's click Save, and it's going to go ahead and build our visualization, and then I'm going to show you how you can do some very, very basic manipulation or analysis before we finish the video. So here, it's ingested the data all the way back from 2017 forward. Let's start by maybe segmenting this by product to make the data a little bit more interesting to look at. So here it is segmented by product. You can see we've got bread, butter, eggs, and milk. We can change the visualization style. And we can also change, of course, the date range. So we've got a number of preset ones. For now, why don't we just choose the last 6 months and apply that. And as you're analyzing the data, keep in mind, because we've got all this rich data behind it, we can apply filters to it as well. So we may want to just say, well, what does our sales look like in just the US? So there we go. We may also want to change the chart type. So we may want to see how our sales reps are performing. So if we go to a heat map and then look at product by sales rep, we'll get an interesting sense of who's selling and who's not and who's performing. So again, this is just a very quick introduction into building our first visualization. If you ever have to go back and edit the data, you can do that here by clicking Edit, and then you can go back and modify the raw data or re-ingest data if you have to. And of course, sharing that data with your colleagues is available there as well. But there you have it, bringing data in from Google Drive through a sheet into a visualization that you can then analyze and share with your colleagues. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, please feel free to let us know, and we'd be happy to help. Thanks again.